Talk more about mangrove conservation, I'm very happy to be joined by Geeta Johari, Project Manager of the Mangroves Initiative at Emirates Nature WWF. Thanks so much for joining us, Geeta.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Geeta, start off by telling us why mangroves is what's being showcased here. Why are they so important to our local ecosystem?
Yeah, of course. So, like forests and rainforests are very important for the environment in other parts of the world, mangroves in the UAE form our very own version of forests. And so, in terms of what mangroves are, yes, it's that one species of trees that we call a mangrove. But mangroves, as a term, is also used to talk about the whole ecosystem. So, in mangroves forests, you have different plants that live there, many birds, crabs, fish, shrimps. And mangroves are very important because they provide that habitat or that home for all these species. And we know that around 30% of the fisheries we have in the UAE, the baby fish, start their lives in the mangrove forests. And another reason why mangroves are so important is that they protect the coastline against storm surges, massive waves, floods. And finally, a lot of studies now show that mangroves capture up to 4 times more carbon than terrestrial forests. And this makes them very, very important in fighting climate change.
And what do we actually know about that? I'm interested in that climate change topic of carbon sequestration, 4 times more than conventional forests. Why is that? What do we know about how that works?
So there is now obviously a lot of evidence that show that climate change is caused by the increased amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is released from different sources, fossil fuels and others. And I'm sure you hear a lot that generally forests are so important in cleaning the air from pollutants through their respiration and what we call photosynthesis. So normally what happens is that CO2 is taken by a tree or a plant through photosynthesis to grow into a bigger tree. And then when that tree is old and breaks down, the carbon within the tree is re-released as CO2 during the decomposition process. And that's what happens on land when there is air in the soil, but that doesn't happen in the mangrove forests since mangroves grow in mud and that oxygen isn't there. So basically, when the tree or the leaves fall down into the mud, the microbes that are decomposing them don't release that CO2. Instead, they release hydrogen sulfide. So those that have been in the mangroves and jumped into the mud and smelled like really gross rotten egg smells, that's because there's no oxygen in the mud and hydrogen sulfide has been produced during the decomposition process. And this explains why mangroves is such an important carbon sink. So in summary, the carbon that's taken from the air and used to grow the plant stays locked into the soil and it doesn't go back into the atmosphere through respiration like other plants or trees. And this is what we call blue carbon.
Right. That's fascinating. I wasn't aware of that. And it makes me appreciate the mangroves we have down in the capital all the more. But talking about the mangroves there, what are the key threats to them, knowing now that they're so important to our local environment? What are the dangers that they face?
Yeah, so mangroves around the world are not thriving as they used to, and they're under threat, like you just mentioned, for various reasons. The new development and construction along the coast, so basically coastal and land development for hotels, ports, marinas, etc., is a huge risk and threat to mangroves. And with development, as you know, come people, traffic, pollution. Pollution can be from oil spills or other industrial pollutants or plastics and litter. We also have fish and shrimp farming that disrupt water flows to which mangrove trees are really sensitive. And then in other countries, some community use timber and wood for fuel and building materials. So overlogging is a threat too.
And just to wrap, tell us a little bit more about Emirates Nature's WWF's mangrove project here.
Yeah, so at Emirates Nature WWF, we're working with MasterCard on a super interesting and important mangrove restoration project in the UAE. It's a project through the Priceless Planet Coalition, which is an international initiative implemented by MasterCard in collaboration with Conservation International and the World Resources Institute. And the project aims to plant 100 million trees around the world by 2025 to restore global forest ecosystems. But in the UAE specifically, the project's primary focus is to regenerate mangrove ecosystems in the Northern Emirates. And the goal is to restore approximately 10 hectares of mangroves over the next 2 years, which is equivalent to 50,000 trees. And throughout the project, we're going to have outreach activities that are also planned to raise awareness on the importance
I think we've just lost.
of
Oh, you're back. Geeta, we just lost you for a second, but I think the connection is freezing just a little bit. So with that, we'll thank Geeta Jahuri, Project Manager of the Mangroves Initiative at Emirates Nature WWF, for her time. We're moving on with the agenda now. We're talking about all things car hailing and ride hailing taxi services and how we're being affected here in the UAE. There was an issue recently where it was pretty difficult to get a car, but is that still the case? There are some new companies available on the market. So stay with us on the agenda on Dubai Eye 103.8. As always, get in touch if you feel like it.
See you driving round town with the girl I love, and I'm like, forget you. I guess the change in my pocket wasn't enough. I'm like, forget you and forget her too. Said if I was richer, I'd still be richer. No, ain't that some shit? And although there's pain in my chest, I still wish you the best. Forget you. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't afford a Ferrari, but that don't mean I can't get you there. I guess he's an Xbox and I'm more Atari. But the way you play your game ain't fair. I picture the fool that falls in love with you. Oh, she's a gold digger. Well, just don't you know? Ooh, I've got some news for you. Yeah, go on and run tell your little boy freeze.